press Control to crouch.
The Crouch Peak Podcast.
Welcome to the Crouch Peak Podcast, a Counter-Strike podcast driven by analytics and narrative. As always, I am your host, Lucas at RBM, and as always, we are a part of the Rushby Media Network. This time around, we have some new listeners coming by way of the Google and iHeart podcast platforms, so thank you to those who have joined us in our expansion as we continue to get the podcast on the various platforms. We just appreciate all of those that are coming in from those alternatives. So thank you as always. Today's episode is going to be a byproduct of one of many circulating rumors and reports and other things, other variables that we will see throughout the very, very fun shuffle season. Very excited. So you blink and you might miss it. There was tons of news going on this last week. In case you missed it, in-game leader for OG, Mr. Aleksi B, may or may not be heading his way to G2. That discussion has at least been entertained. And as far as the communal effort has concerned itself, I've seen a lot of fan conversation being had in regards to Aleksi B on G2, which is a very, very interesting move, for the lack of a better term, for various reasons. There is no denying his prowess as far as game planning, as far as tactics. He is renowned as an in-game leader as far as having a robust system and players to benefit from that. So that will be very interesting. We saw him previously with ENCE go to the semifinals at a major. And since then, we saw that iteration of ENCE fall out. We've now seen him on OG. And unfortunately, this OG roster did not really pan out. Me personally, I would often consider them painfully average is what I would like to call them. They would often lose to teams that you would expect them to. They would win against teams you would often expect them to. And very far and few between, you would have these moments of upsets. And then it felt like in between those upsets, you would have more commonly those frustrating losses against teams that they should beat. And if you go through their match history, you will see losses that were pivotal in moments when they probably could not have lost. That mediocrity floating above 50%, you're beating the teams you should. And then the one time when you beat the team you shouldn't, now you have to go back and try and upset the team that you're consistently not beating. And that is a hard thing to do. And so now we're looking at an OG roster that potentially has played out its tenure together. As far as what I envision ceiling-wise for this lineup, I feel like it's largely rounded out. They're sitting at 50 and 34 as a lineup, which keeps them ever so slightly below that 60% threshold that you will often see top teams winning. I look back to the Grand Slam Liquid. They were winning something at like 65 to 67%. So anything above that 60% threshold, that's when you're really talking about world beater status. You are consistently beating every team you should, and then you are trouncing in some capacities the top 3-4 teams, which is something that OG has been unable to do in a consistent manner since Aleksi B has been on this team. Now, that is where things get interesting because Aleksi B is not a bad in-game leader. Seeing mid-tier results on a worse performing team and then suggesting that he should go to a better team facing harder competition and that would ultimately result in a net positive, that is a difficult sell. But when you look at Aleksi B and you think about this tenure with OG, it's very possible that this situation compared to the previous situation at ENS, that mold did not fit him in the right manner. It did not allow him to benefit in the way that he does individually, which then, of course, translates to the overall team play. So there are a lot of human variables to this outside of Counter-Strike. When I look at where Aleksi B is at his point in his career, I am not ready to give up on him. I feel like a lot of people are not. I have seen some criticisms drawn G2's way for this rumor or report. But that's not what I want to get focused on. This episode is not about Aleksi B, actually, contrary to what the first 5-6 minutes would suggest, actually. I want to pivot away from that and actually focus on OG as they sit at 18th in world ranking. They're inside of the top 20, but certainly one of the weaker top 20 teams as far as recent results are concerned, as far as sheer firepower. I feel like just across the board, this OG lineup and pretty much every iteration of OG has been largely underwhelming. And again, I don't think it's any one individual's fault. I think sometimes you just have a group of individuals that don't work out, and that does not mean anyone is to blame. However, OG clearly have improvements to make, especially if they want to escape that floating around top 20, get back into the echelons of top 10, and even hit new heights. They're going to have to find the weak spots of this core at the bare minimum of the final 4 players, assuming Aleksi B does leave. And they're going to have to find out what needs to be replaced and how to best get this machine fully operational. Just because when I consider OG's entrance into the scene, the hype that was delivered, and then you consider the product that has been revealed to us, it does seem a little underwhelming. And I don't think they have to work terribly hard to improve. And that is the root of this episode today, and that's what I want to get into next. So assuming Aleksi B leaves, just following that logic, OG are going to need an in-game leader. And all logic would suggest grab Nexa, right? Since he's at G2, Aleksi B goes to G2. Simple negotiations, get him over there. He's a high fragging volume, high individually driven in-game leader. And it could potentially shake up the lineup in ways that Aleksi B was not able to, coming as a system-driven in-game leader, correct? Well, I directly am challenging that logic. Even though writing on the wall, all logic paths point to Nexa as far as what I'm seeing in the public space, the chatter that's happening, I'm seeing a lot of Nexa to OG does make sense. But I am here to pivot that logic and move to a different in-game leader, one that has a solid portfolio as far as career achievements are concerned. Lots of high-profile wins against top teams on the biggest stages, and from a country that is very reputable in the Counter-Strike scene historically. And I'm going to give you a little hint. It was in the title of the podcast episode. So if you can't think of it, I'll just go ahead and reveal it. And of course, I am talking about Fnatic veteran, Fnatic long-time in-game leader, Mr. Golden himself. So when you compare Nexa and Golden to one another through the lens of individual prowess only, it is pretty easy to conclude that Nexa would be more valuable. But again, we are talking about in-game leadership here, and individual talent is not necessarily 100% of the conversation. And honestly, when you look at career versus career, sure, Nexa does look significantly more impressive when you just go stats to stats, player versus player. However, when you factor in his most recent performance individually or team-wise on G2, it does definitely shake the confidence of that argument, especially this iteration on G2 was not nearly as individually impactful as he was on, say, Crazy or as, let's say, Valiance, right? And obviously those are two significantly different tiers of Counter-Strike, but that is what I'm trying to get that focus on. That's the focal point that I'm trying to hammer home. So when you look through the recent history, this G2 tenure with Nexa, specifically the 13 months when he was able to call for Nico and Hunter, besides the second placing at the major, which is not even a major victory, it is just, when you look at the grand scope of things, that is their best performance, getting second at the first major in such a long time. But overall, 13 months with one of the best purely talented individuals like in the world, and then Hunter, who is definitely in the top dozen as far as that individual prowess is concerned. You can have that argument. No trophies to show for it, not a single one. Unfortunately, a lot of events where they just straight up like start floundering, you losing to teams that they outright shouldn't, losing to Ents multiple times during this tenure, losing to Mouse, a team that, again, we don't know if they're even going to be intact on the other side of this shuffle. Furia, they lost to Nip at they didn't even win Flashpoint 3, which, I mean, come on. They lost to Nip at Flashpoint 3. At that series specifically, Device like solo carried that whole game. And then again, you have one single opper who is completely I know it's Device. He's completely dominating. You can't offer any kind of in-game strategy to work around that. You can't find your way to call around that. That's a very trying thing for me. EPL Season 14, losing to Sinners, losing to Complexity, losing to Forza, losing to Virtus Pro, losing to OG, going 21st to 24th. Losing to Big, losing to Movie Star at the RMR, losing to Ents at the RMR. These are too inconsistent of results. And I think one of the consistencies in the inconsistency that we saw in G2, and all of these major losses against teams that they probably should not have, and outright in some of these situations definitely should not have, Nexa is the consistency. He consistently is underperforming, and you will catch him at the bottom of the scoreboard. So what we have here is an individually driven in-game leader that is not performing individually. So if I am OG management and I'm considering Nexa, which I'm sure they are, he's at that team that they're potentially sending Aleksi B, and he's ripe for the taking, assuming he wants to continue calling and assuming he's no longer in G2's plans. It would make sense. But I'm disputing that because I don't think that he is ready. I think that this tenure at G2 showed that he is not ready for those new heights, to be top 3 consistently, to beat the Navis of the world, to even beat Vitality. They weren't even consistently doing that. And you look to Golden, a guy who may also struggle with some of those individual consistencies. He definitely had those problems on Fnatic. So did the whole team. I will not dispute that. However, we are talking about 2 different players at 2 different points in their career. Golden is 27 years old. He is tried and true. He has succeeded as an in-game leader, without a doubt. He has 4 trophies to his name. He's got WESG. He's got Kato 2018. He's got Malmo 2019. And he's got the ESL Pro League Season 11. And when I say trophies, I mean major trophies. Things that you can go onto HLTV and would be notably identifiable as major tournaments with MVP trophies being handed out. You look to Nexa, 13 months. Sorry, I got my dates mixed up. 13 months and nothing to show for it. And by no means am I trying to shut the door on Nexa, nor am I trying to try and undermine his future potential in any capacity. I'm saying right now, if OG want to come out of this shuffle, want to look towards the 2022 season and not be average, I think they need to look to Golden. And I don't think it just starts with one singular move. It doesn't start with just Golden. You grab Golden and you let him bring somebody with him. I think that is one of the prerequisites you need when you look at this core. The core honestly is not bad. So one of the issues with it is you're going to have to convince an in-game leader to come in with a team that you want largely unchanged, but also assure him that he will have the freedoms to be the leader. And one of the surefire bargaining chips as far as bringing in an in-game leader is concerned is giving them the opportunity to bring in a singular talent so that they can start with. So you have 2 open spots. Okay, I'd like to bring you in-game leader. And not only that, I will give you the liberty of choosing the 5th player, right? But now we look at this OG lineup. They have 4 players outside of Aleksi B. So you're going to have to shave one of them. And when you're looking at the core of this team, this core 4, Mantu, Flamesy, Valde, Nico, I think it's a pretty easy conversation to have. And I think Nico is the one that goes. And I think that conversation is pretty quick. When you size him up to his other 3 teammates, and then you consider the roles that they play, the production that they offer, and how replaceable they are, Nico certainly is the most replaceable out of all of them. Not only that, what Golden kind of brings in skill set wise, he will be able to fill in for Nico and in certain capacities actually do better. So not only that, when you are taking the responsibilities of said rifler in Nico, right, and you are allocating them to the in-game leader, you will now potentially have that 4th limb, that individual that would be replacing Nico, to not do those supportive roles. And now that individual can come in and purely focus on impact, on offensive output, on defensive prowess, and just overall taking the team as far as firepower is concerned to those next steps. And that compounding with the fact that Golden is an offensively driven in-game leader could potentially allow for these young stars like Mantu and Flamesy to really hit new heights. I mean, honestly, if we could get somebody in there who has played the best talent on the biggest stages and have that individual come in and translate those experiences to Mantu, to Flamesy, and even to Valde, a guy who is brimming with talent, who is still brimming with talent, coming off a top 20 ranking, goes to OG, and like his stock, in my opinion, for me, his stock has never been at the heights that it was at when he was at North. His stock has been consistently decreasing since he's been on OG. So I was a huge fan of Valde before he came over to OG. He's really been quiet since then. Would love to see that turnaround, honestly. Would really love to see him get back to that incredible form. And the first step is to get an in-game leader in there who can do that. And for me, all the way, that's Golden. And you let him bring on a 5th. As far as who that could be, not quite sure. When I think of a quick short list of individuals in this theoretical, let's say Golden joins OG, Flusha makes a lot of sense. He did follow him to Cloud9. I know JW's available, not quite as spectacular since he wouldn't be opping. But for me, definitely looking back at those Fnatic lineups, makes a lot of sense. Flusha really makes a lot of sense. And big picture, what does that look like? A core of Mantu, Valde, and Flamesy, accompanied by Flusha and Golden. From my perspective, that is an upward trajectory from what OG is looking like right now. If I'm the manager, I certainly try and get that done. When I look at all available variabilities and you are confirming that, yes, I want to stick with this core of Mantu, Flamesy, Valde, I think far and away this is the best next step. If Aleksi B's out, you get rid of Nico, bring on Golden, give him the keys to the castle, let him bring anybody in. Short list, just off of the top of my head, Flusha does make the most sense. And honestly, that general 2-player move is more than enough to get me excited for the 2022 iteration of OG. Now, of course, this is purely hypothetical, and we have a ways to go before we realize what this, what OG look like, what G2 look like, if Aleksi B is even going. Purely speculation, guys. But nevertheless, thank you for sticking around while I speculate. And as far as this session of speculation is concerned, it is finalized. So thank you for everybody. Follow the podcast on Twitter at crouch_peak, Peek. You can follow me on Twitter at Lucas@RBM. You can follow the Crouch Peak podcast on a plethora of streaming services: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, Google. Of course, we are on YouTube. So we are just working to provide this podcast to all available listeners on all available channels. So again, thank you. We are consistently working on growing, and we aim to make a better product each and every episode that we release. And I hope that we are continuing to do that. So again, thanks so much, guys. If I can get one more episode out before the start of 2022, I would certainly like to, just with the holidays and stuff. We will see. Lots of stuff on my mind, lots of stuff I would love to talk about and convey to you guys and open up that conversation, because I don't really have a reason. I just absolutely love to do it. So that's it for me, guys. I'm rambling, so I'm going to get on out of here. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you at the next episode.